Welcome and thank you for joining us at the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston this morning. I'm Lydia Luz, a member of our church for 16 years. Like the living tradition of Unitarian Universalism, we too can draw wisdom from the world's religions to inspire us in our ethical and spiritual lives. In this morning's sermon, Wisdom in Context, Reverend Scott thinks about using a world of resources to add meaning and depth to our lives. For those of you new to our congregation or our online services, I invite you to continue watching after the benediction to hear more about the living tradition that is Unitarian Universalism. We now invite you to hear our call to worship.
Come into this place with your whole self, the parts that are raw and exposed, the part that is beaming with joy, the part that is seeking the truth, the new, the possibility. Come into this place, open your heart, lay down your burden, lift up your hope for something new to happen. Come into this place with fellow travelers on the journey, some faces new and others familiar, and all welcoming you here, now, to this moment. Come, let us worship together.
Celebremos compartiendo nuestras vidas, encendiendo esta luz.
We give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
Please join with me in the spirit that some call meditation and others name prayer. Make yourself comfortable. Relax. Take one deep breath and then another. Open your mind, open your heart. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and mystery beyond all our naming. We've heard much this week about it being 1 year since the shutters were closed and blinds were drawn on life as we knew it before the pandemic. In many ways, it seems much longer. It seems so long since we've come together as a community, so long since our families have gathered without worry, so long since we've been able to make plans without agonizing over the health repercussions. We are so ready to move on, for this to be over. But we cannot pretend that it is over until it is over. As more and more of us receive the vaccine, may we remember to continue to wear a mask to protect others. We know we cannot rush the long hoped-for result or prioritize our own comfort over the health of others, or the pandemic will continue. We continue to hold in our hearts and offer support to those still suffering from the repercussions of the February freeze and failure of leadership that led to the power grid failure. The onslaught of fatal shootings in our city continues. It seems each morning brings news of more. We mourn with the families of victims. May our political leaders finally consider common sense gun reform. Yet we remind ourselves to be grateful. Despite a breathtakingly difficult year, we are grateful for those things we do have. We are grateful for those who support us and that we are able to support one another. We are grateful for those things in our lives that we once took for granted. We pray in the names of all those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten. We pray in the names of all helpers of humankind. May the congregation, absent in body, though present in spirit, say Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. We mourn with the families of several people important to those in our church community and that have passed away. Marilyn Gaskell, a former active member of our congregation, on March 3rd. Malcolm McAfee, father of Prill McAfee, this past Sunday. Pat McGee, mother of Jim McGee, on Monday, and Shirley Crowder, sister of Cynthia Singleton, who has also passed away. 2 others are undergoing health challenges, and we send healing wishes. Julia Amborski, who fell and broke her arm, and Pat Modisette, who has been hospitalized. I invite you now to say the name or bring to mind those you wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. They are part of the great cloud of witness and memory, and we will, even if we do not know their names, hold them in our hearts. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We pause in awe and wonder of the mystery that is life, in the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion. I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
The Thoreau Dream Scholarship was started in 2003 as a way to not only lift students and their families out of poverty, but to help start a ripple effect in communities where children might not know anyone who has attended college. Our hope was that other kids in the community would begin to think that a post-high school education was possible for them, too. In a world where schooling past high school is vitally important, so far this full tuition scholarship has paid to send 54 kids to college or technical school. And the students are grateful for the help. One young woman recently sent a note saying, "I am truly appreciative for the support, encouragement, and positivity that you have provided me over the years. I am looking forward to being able to pay it forward by helping others in the future, just as you have helped me. Thank you." This week, our regular Sunday morning shared offering invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action by helping to pay tuition for the 10 students currently in school this semester. We ask you to give generously to the Thoreau Dream Scholarship. An offering will now be gratefully received.
Our first reading is an excerpt from the Chapter 3 introduction by Kathleen Rollins from Sources of Our Faith, Inspirational Readings. There are many paths to truth. Some have been forged through centuries of spiritual practices, sacred texts, communal traditions, and ways of connecting with the holy. The great religions of the world have discovered ineffable understandings of reality and the human experience. Unitarian Universalists recognize the wisdom found in cultural traditions throughout history and around the globe. Some UUs go to their congregation to sit in Buddhist meditation, others to study the Bible or to attend a pagan ritual. Some of us declare dual or multiple religious identities, and some of us, who have well-established connections in Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, and pagan or Wiccan communities, have found that a Unitarian Universalist congregation offers a spiritual home to us and our families. Most Unitarian Universalists engage with texts, practices, and rituals from the world's religions as a way to deepen our spiritual lives. We recognize what is common among the many teachings throughout history and draw upon these elements for our worship. All religions may not proclaim a common message, but they do share some universal insights. These are often found in ethical teachings and exhortations toward justice. We learn how to treat one another as we understand our many faiths. We also find inspiration from the contemplative and devotional practices that have been developed around the world. These time-tested methods of approaching the divine have much to teach us. They can complement and deepen our Unitarian Universalism, not threaten it.
Our second reading is Only Breath by Rumi. Not Christian or Jew or Muslim, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi, or Zen. Not any religion or cultural system. I am not from the East or the West, not out of the ocean or up from the ground, not natural or ethereal, not composed of elements at all. I do not exist. I am not an entity in this world or in the next. Did not descend from Adam and Eve or any origin story. My place is placeless, a trace of the traceless, neither body or soul. I belong to the beloved, have seen the two worlds as one, and that one called two and know. First, last, outer, inner, only that breath-breathing human being.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, 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 alhamdulillah.
I invite you to look around. If the time on your smartphone doesn't match the time on the clocks around your home, you may have forgotten that daylight saving time began at 2 this morning. So if you think it's 10:30, but your phone says 11:30, you may have some clocks to reset. At least you didn't show up an hour late to church. I'm reminded of a coworker of mine back when I worked in corporate America. One Monday morning, she was late for work. A busy mother of 3 girls, she hadn't realized the clocks had changed until she dropped off her kids at school that morning. Now, this despite having gone to church the previous day. You see, her minister was so long-winded and his sermons were so long that when she arrived in the middle of the sermon, she thought she was just a few minutes late, as usual. Later that day, she wondered why TV shows seemed to be at slightly different times, but didn't really think much about it. Our theme this week is the third Unitarian Universalist source, wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. And, judging from my friend's minister, apparently some wisdom takes longer to communicate to congregations than others. In this sermon series, we are lifting up the 6 sources of our Unitarian Universalist faith, not only as sources of our living tradition, but as sources of spiritual grounding during very challenging times. In January, our theme was the first source, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. In February, we examined words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. During our recent Membership 101 classes, when Alma and I introduce ourselves to new members, we talk about how we found our way to Unitarian Universalism. I often say that I imagine that most people would assume that I was drawn to this faith tradition because of its accepting and welcoming stances on sexual minorities. But, I explain, for me that was just an added bonus. I explain, growing up Methodist in Kentucky, I couldn't wrap my head around the concept that I happened to be born in the right place at the right time to be privy to one of the only few legitimate religions, which espouse the one and only divinely created means to salvation. While I like to think of myself as special, even I wasn't that special. Now, I'm quick to point out that doesn't mean that I believe that made those beliefs by those all around me invalid. I just couldn't help but wonder why the faith of my culture, based on a faith started 2,000 years earlier in a culture halfway around the world, was the only right one. It was the Unitarian Universalist respect for wisdom found in many world religions that I initially found compelling. As Kathleen Rollins wrote in our first reading, there are many paths to truth. The great religions of the world have discovered ineffable understandings of reality and the human experience. Now, while this faith tradition has clearly grown out of Protestant roots, we know that not all wisdom worth considering is to be found in the Christian or Jewish pasts that many Unitarian Universalists share. And we will talk about the fourth source, Jewish and Christian teachings, next month, just as we're examining the third source, wisdom from the world's religions, this month. A question from a friend recently made me wonder why these are two different sources. After all, aren't Judaism and Christianity world religions? Aren't we just setting up a problematic dichotomy and distinction? Well, given to analogies, this occurred to me. People, while talking about those who have mentored them and lent them wisdom, might mention how elderly people are a great source of insight and help. However, they might mention by name their grandparents, with whom they have a long-standing relationship. Now, while not all Unitarian Universalists have a long-standing relationship with either Christianity or Judaism, certainly our faith tradition does. While we acknowledge wisdom may be found in many religions, our tradition's relationship with these two might be considered worthy of special mention. And parenthetically, as I explained in a sermon in January, one of the reasons the sources were separated from the principles was to give voice to sources that have historically or currently informed our faith tradition, not necessarily as a guideline for our covenant going forward, like the principles. So, back to wisdom from the world's religions. The word wisdom gets bandied about a lot. What do we mean when we say wisdom? Merriam-Webster tells us it's thought of as insight, judgment, and knowledge. Franciscan friar and spiritual writer Richard Rohr expands the definition to say, wisdom is clearly more than mere intelligence, knowledge of facts, or information. Wisdom is more synthesis than analysis, more paradoxical than linear, more a dance than a march. He then tells us, in order to grow in wisdom, we need to move beyond cerebral, rational knowing. He then quotes mystic and writer Cynthia Bourgeault, wisdom is not knowing more, but knowing with more of you, knowing deeper. So, if we want to grow in wisdom, why wouldn't we avail ourselves of all the resources at hand? Use those resources that most resonate with us as individuals. More and more folks realize this is not only a possibility, but a path to an enhanced spirituality. I've read reports by multiple people who say that Buddhist practice has enhanced their faith as a Christian. It's not unusual for people of various faith traditions to engage in the Hindu practice of yoga. And as was mentioned in our first reading, some UUs go to their congregation to sit in Buddhist meditation, others to study the Bible or to attend a pagan ritual. Some of us declare dual or multiple religious identities, and some of us who have well-established connections in Christian, Buddhist, or Jewish, and pagan or Wiccan communities have found that a Unitarian Universalist congregation offers a spiritual home to us and our families. An early proponent of interfaith understanding, over half a century ago, was the mystic, poet, and Trappist monk Thomas Merton, who wrote books on Zen Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, and how Christianity related to them. His exploration of Eastern religions led him to travel extensively and attend international conferences on religion, and he is known for his dialogues with prominent Asian figures, such as the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh. Many of you remember that our beloved former minister, Bob Shively, also met with Thich Nhat Hanh. Well, as you might imagine, Merton's interest in Eastern religions did not sit well with many who viewed Christianity, and in particular Catholicism, as being all one might need, so to speak. especially some of his superiors at the Abbey of Our Lady of Gethsemane in Kentucky, where he lived. Despite tensions, he was able to become a writer, theologian, social activist, and scholar of comparative religion. And his influence since his death has only grown. Now, I don't want to give the impression that exploring various religions should only be done by relating it to or adding it to another religion like Christianity. There are many ways to explore one's spirituality, but some have found it helpful to use what they're familiar with as a basis or springboard to further insight. I have also talked to people who have questioned the faith of their childhood and explored many other avenues and possibilities. They returned, like the hero in the monomyth, changed and transformed to find new meaning in what they left. So there are lots of ways to do this. Well, it will come as no surprise to most of you that there remain those who believe their beliefs are the only correct beliefs. That attitude was not limited to Kentucky in the 1960s when Thomas Merton lived in an abbey near Bardstown and I attended a Methodist church in Ryland Heights. A common factor by those who espouse such beliefs, at least it seems to me, is that they believe they have a clear understanding of the intentions and will of the Creator, aka God, and that those intentions and will were true not only when the books they find holy were written, but now. That we humans should mold our lives to fit the context of those beliefs from however long ago. I believe that the divine, aka God, mystery beyond human comprehension, is not limited by context. To my mind, that would be laughable. To think that a supreme creator could only relate to his creation in the context of the Middle East 2,000 or 6,000 years ago makes no sense. Those who insist that we relate to the divine in a historic prescribed way are both selling God short by putting the divine in a box, and they are demanding that our relationship to the divine be in the way that they relate and find acceptable. They're attempting to limit the limitless. Additionally, when they are saying that God is inerrant, what they are inadvertently saying is that their understanding of God being inerrant is also inerrant. And that takes a huge amount of hubris. As these things happen, as I was thinking about the idea of context, I happened upon an article about eating patterns in different parts of the world. While humans are humans and the ways our bodies use fuels are pretty much the same, the way different folks in different cultures and countries think about food and make recommendations about healthy eating is often very, very different. In some countries, like the USA and England, recommendations attempt to be straightforward and science-based. Of course, once we weed out those studies by food conglomerates with their predetermined outcomes, other countries look at the experience of the meal, who we eat with, when we eat, how we eat, and our enjoyment of the meal. So if people are people and science is science, why the different recommendations on how to eat healthy? Because they reflect the context, the resources, the weather, the wealth and poverty of the population. They consider the traditions and religious practices of the culture. And as I mentioned, the lobbyists and political realities of the country. So, nutrition, which is ostensibly science-based, albeit with an ever-evolving understanding of science, is quite different around the world in different contexts at this one point in history. Imagine how something as ethereal as religion, as an understanding of the inexplicable divine, of spirituality, must be different in different contexts, especially at different times in history. To insist that one group's understanding must be timeless and universal strikes me as arrogant as it is wrong. But many of us have heard for years, from those I mentioned before, that we humans should mold our lives to fit the context of long ago. And the reason they give for that is that God is never changing, and thus the laws of God are never changing. After all, human nature is human nature. Well, I would say not so fast. Because people have said for a long time that God is immutable, theology speak for unchanging, and impassible, theology speak for unaffected by the world. That doesn't make it so. If the Creator is beyond our understanding, how can we definitively say they are unchanging and unaffected by what we do? As I said a moment ago, I believe that the divine, aka God, mystery beyond human comprehension is not limited by context. I've probably mentioned process theology in a sermon here before, and according to that way of thinking, it is an essential attribute of God to affect and be affected by temporal processes, contrary to many historic ways of trying to assign attributes. In other words, God relates to us moment by moment in our context. In this theology, we are a universe of free choosers. Because we are free to choose here and now, God doesn't know in advance what all will happen. The word heretic comes from the Greek word heretikos, meaning able to choose. Our Universalist and Unitarian historical theological ancestors were ridiculed and even burned at the stake for being heretics. Now, having a streak of the heretical myself, I don't personally believe that God is omnipotent, infinite in power, or omniscient, all-knowing. If God is not making us choose one way, how are they all-powerful? And if they don't know which choice we're making, how can they be all-knowing? These questions were similar to the ones our theological ancestors were asking a couple hundred years ago when they railed against Calvinism and predestination. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe in an eternal divine entity. It just means I question some long-standing multisyllabic adjectives. And I believe that God exercises relational power, not unilateral control. And because they relate to us where we are in our context, that can be through a multitude of venues. Venues such as wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. We Unitarian Universalists not only embrace our right to choose, but we are covenantal, not creedal, which means we agree how we intend to treat one another and act in the world, not agree to the same set of beliefs. So we no more would define God for others as have them define the divine for us. We support one another in examining these resources so that we can love more exuberantly, create meaning in our lives, and work for justice. And we long to deepen our spiritual lives. And we can embrace the texts, practices, and rituals from the world's religions to do so. So we can move beyond knowing more to know with more of ourselves, knowing deeper. Amen, and so be it.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. No matter if you live now far or near, no matter what your weakness or your strength, there is not one alive account outside. May deeper joy for all now come at length. May deeper joy for all now come at length. Let none among us lie or self-deceive, nor cultivate a hatred all or part. May never one of us live by our rage, nor wish another injury of heart, nor wish another injury of heart. Just as the goodly mother will protect her children even at risk of her own life, so may we nurture an old mindfulness, a boundless heart beyond all fear and strife, a boundless heart beyond all fear and strife.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith communities. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving.
Please join me in thanking Valerie Tolman, Carolyn Leap, and Alma Viscara, our Membership and Communications Coordinator, for participating in today's service. Mark Vogel, our music director, was accompanied by Charlie Burris on guitar and bass. For those of you who may be new to this congregation or the online services, let us say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. Unitarian Universalism is a faith where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, your expansive heart. As Unitarian Universalists, we join together on a journey that honors everywhere we've been before. Together, we create a force more powerful than one person or one belief system. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. Rather than a creed, we share a covenant based on a set of 7 principles. These include the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the knowledge that we are part of an interconnected web of all existence that calls us to honor the earth and all creatures. Thank you for being with us today.
church continues to meet online while a pandemic and unpredictable weather keep us physically apart. There are groups meeting both weekly and monthly to keep you connected and engaged with our community. Grab a cup of joe, then join us this morning at 11:30 for the Coffee Half Hour to chat with new and old friends. Next, join the discussion circle at noon for a conversation asking, what is the gig economy and how can we confront it? If you enjoy picking and grinning with friends, join the string band Thursday at 7. Young adults won't want to miss Friday at 3, when you can meet with others for conversation and sharing. A new gathering for those members and friends of First UU who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color is beginning next Sunday at 4. RSVP to bipoc@firstuu.org to get the Zoom link or more information. Many of the topics for upcoming discussion groups are on our website, firstuu.org/online-group-meetings. Visit there for more details and to sign up. And remember, all times shown are Central Daylight Time.